the correct place?
Yes, indeed, General. Join us, please.
Madam, flatter me, Colonel. Colonel is fine. Yes, I received. Are you Miss Lamouth?
Yes.
Yes, thank you for sending me the letter. I'm not familiar with this place, but yes. Hello, greetings to everyone who's here. Hello. My goodness, I am used to saying hello back. Wonderful. I'm not used to how are you, just a blanket hello. Thank you. Yes, of course. Yes. Hello, greetings. Mr. Reedy, good to see you as always. How is the meadow? Yeah. Yes, but I was asked if I am correct for your letter here. And I did review it as I was riding here today, and it said I would be, there's a panel, I take it that this is the panel you speak of course. And I'm supposed to help with this in the sense of with Mr. Gault. If I'm correct, Miss Manges, he is chronically late. Yes, he is. So I will fill that time until he arrives, because I was also asked in this letter if I could speak on my time in this area. Now, as I was riding here, I did find it interesting. I'm not sure why you picked this spot specifically, but there's a creek outside called Cherry Creek. Are you familiar with that? I was not either, but everyone asks me about cherries, and I'm not sure why. So I found this a very humorous twist of fate that I would arrive here, and the first thing I see is a sign for Cherry Creek. But I digress. And to see so many people here that are focused on, if I am correct, also some of the sites that I am very familiar with and where I have been, and throughout this area, finding myself caught up in a conflict not very long ago, where there was a conflict between the British Crown as well as the French, and how we would deal with that enemy, how we would deal with the conflict over the Ohio country. Now, as you heard me refer to the meadow, Mr. Reedy, I am thankful, sir, that you have been upkeeping the fortifications there, correct?
Yes.
Even after the French burned them.
Made it quite a mess of the place.
Well,
Take care of it.
okay, you're very kind in your words, sir. Yes, but of course, finding that conflict coming to a head there, and building a small fortification, and of course having to surrender that fort. If I am correct, Mr. Reedy has constructed, or at least tried to bring some of the earthenworks as well as the stockade. So I thank you, sir, for that. But as well, throughout this area, finding conflict in the sense of the Battle of the Monongahela. Many of you are familiar with Pittsburgh, of course. Yes? Yeah. Yes, that is good. I am happy you are not mute. Yes, that on the banks of the Monongahela, there was a great battle that occurred, being there with General Braddock and the forces there, and a terrible defeat as well, where we did have to retreat back across the Monongahela. We were not able to take the forks of the Ohio and claim it for king and country at that point, in 1755, and trying to take Fort Ligonier. We failed at that moment. Now, for the next 3 years, I was trying to protect the frontier and this, what you might consider where we are at today, or the Ohio country. But then I found myself joining General John Forbes in a large army of over 6,000 to attack Fort Ligonier, building forts as we went along. One of them also, I believe, Miss Manges, you have been overseeing some of the fortifications there as well. Yes, wonderful. I hear the provincials they've done a fine job on, it's not falling down anymore. Wonderful. Yes. But while I was there, when I arrived very late in the season, we were worried if we would even be able to try and attack the forts of the Ohio, to attack Fort Ligonier. And General Forbes had actually made the decision to remain at the post at Loyal Hannah, Fort Ligonier. And it was directly after that that I was involved in an incident that put my life in the most jeopardy it had ever been before or since. And that was a friendly fire incident. There was a group of French nearby. We had sent out a large group of our troops. They were not coming back. It was very far, difficult to see. And then, as I was asked by General Fort that I should go out as well, I took another 500 Virginians, and we went to try and surround the enemy. But it was unfortunate, due to the weather, due to the lack of visibility, we mistook each other. And a hot fire that ensued. When I realized this, I tried to stop that fire by moving down the line of troops near me, knocking up their presented pieces, trying to stop any further bloodshed. But we were able to take a few French stragglers prisoner, brought them back to the old fort, and were able to get vital information. When we got that information, we found that Fort Duquesne was weak, and General Fort's changed his decision. And we marched, and on our way, I believe we passed right by where you are at. Is that correct?
That is
Yes, of course. This is rather interesting. You all have, never mind. But yes, and as we approached Fort Duquesne, we instead, as we had prepared for a battle to proceed, we found that the fort was nothing but ash and ruin. That the French had burned their own fort and vacated. And General Fort was able to claim that spot for King and Company. And he called it Pittsburgh. And I believe the people in this area have very much called it Burg, Pittsburgh. Is that correct? Yes. I've heard of the pirates on the Three Rivers. They talk of, yes.
Steelers.
Sorry?
Pirates and Steelers.
Steel.
Black and gold.
Ah, yes, and you said pirates. See, this worries me. You should reach out to your governor. That is not, pirates are not a good thing. But again, yes, I hope so. But yes, I have found myself, as I have gone back to Mount Vernon, reflecting on this time, even riding here today, allowed me to remember many of these places and how they affected me in a great way. But also the fact that I do fear that there may be repercussions for these events occurring. I am not sure how that will unfold, but I'm sure we will see how that occurs. Correct? Yes. But I believe that I have, now with this panel, there's going to be questions asked.
Questions on the podium.
Yes, on the podium. Well, I believe Mr. Gault has arrived as well, so I'll wait for him to join us. And by that, I mean, I will become Matt. Hi. It's Is this hello? Whoa. It's amazing how many people listen to you when you walk around with fake hair and a sword. So everyone, I'm Matt Gault, I'm the Director of Education. I moonlight as George Washington. And it's always exciting to be able to talk to folks and be able to do that, just to, especially like what we're talking about today and how we can commemorate this history and tie all our different sites, our areas, businesses, everything into the history that's coming up here. And I'm very excited that I was asked to be able to take part in this panel and be able to ask some of these questions. So I think you've already been introduced to our panelists up here. I hope you're all ready for The Price is Right. But I think we'll start off with this, and actually, Brian, you get the first question. You ready to rock and roll?
Hit it.
Yeah, all right. So I think what we're going to do is when we ask you this first one to start, Brian, and then we'll go down if anyone wants to jump in, especially because it's this first one that what is essentially your site's connection to American history and why you think your site's story is important to tell during this America's 250th. So Brian, if you want to take that one first.
Thank you, Matt.
Of course.
And again, pleasure to be here and share history. And yes, I am a child of the bicentennial. That makes me old. I've always had a passion for history. I was one of those freaky kids that when my parents would say, do you want to go to Hershey Park or to Valley Forge? I would go to Valley Forge or Gettysburg or someplace like that. I still got to Hershey Park. I wasn't that weird. But anyway, the sites that I had the pleasure of taking care of, Fort Ligonier and Friendship Hill, they have a deep connection in providing that relevance to the visitors. I think where we meet that goal, Fort Ligonier seems pretty easy. It is the beginnings of the French-Indian War. That war becomes a global war, fought on every continent, with the exception of Antarctica and Australia. Nearly 1 million people would die in this war. It was the great game changer of the 18th century. And with Britain's victory, they would take possession of what France had in North America. And that slowly begins their decline and road to the revolution. And as they fight the revolution, they would choose George Washington. Washington doesn't do very well. And I like to say, though, it's like a good hockey team. He's played to get to the playoffs, and he always ends up winning the championship. But who helps him? It's France. And why does France come to our aid? Because they love a young, budding republic, an absolute monarch? No, they really hate Britain. And that revenge comes to our benefit. And without French muskets and gunpowder used in their army, navy, French loans of money, you would not have to worry about a 4th of July picnic. And that's the story we emphasize at Fort Necessity. Friendship Hill, and I want to thank Steve for mentioning Friendship Hill. The forgotten statesman Albert Gallatin plays a crucial role in the early republic, helping to get it on a firm financial footing. He's also a great story of what makes America great as the melting pot. He is a young man who is escaping Europe, comes from a Swiss background, would quickly make himself, I often say, he and Hamilton were more American than the Americans that were born here. He worked really hard to do that. 50 years of public service, and is unfortunately forgotten, but does a lot of things that we are familiar with in history. And he also fails. Nothing wrong with failure. I think we always want to make accolades for success. But as I often tell the young rangers that work with me, I learn more from bad supervisors than I do good supervisors. So it's always fun working for good supervisors. And Gallatin had, at times, bad supervisors, bad individuals to deal with, and he also failed. He described himself as a bad farmer. But from these things, he would learn and become a better person. And that's what we emphasize, especially to children. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how you do learn. So that's what my 2 sites deal with. We deal with the failure of George at Fort Necessity, and how he kind of picked himself up by his bootstraps and then went on to a much larger career, and also the consequences of what he did there. And then a young Gallatin who embraces America and becomes a great American and for the Republic. So, okay, enough blathering on my part. Who gets it next?
Do we just want to pass it out so that way everyone knows what whose site is?
So everything Brian said also applies to Fort Ligonier, except the Albert Gallatin part. We're part of the Forbes campaign, and young George was also at the fort. And the friendly fire story he told is very relevant because, again, it's yet another failure, but something good comes out of that, and they get intelligence they didn't have. And so, we're French-Indian War. We're not part of the American Revolution, but what we're trying to emphasize is that in order to truly understand the American Revolution, you have to understand the backstory, which is the French and Indian War.
Okay, and I'm representing historic Hannistown, which we're getting more of a civilian story when you get to historic Hannistown. Although Colonel Washington did supervise the troops that constructed Ford's Road through the area that is now Westmoreland County and historic Hannistown, the town didn't start existing until 1769, which was the first time it was legal for white settlers to own property west of the Allegheny Mountains. And it wasn't long before the Penn proprietary government realized, with the help of Arthur St. Clair and the residents living here, that we needed a new county seat west of the Alleghenies, and historic Hannistown was named to act as the first county seat of that first county west of the Alleghenies, Westmoreland. And at that point, that was all of southwestern Pennsylvania, all of current day Fayette, Greene County, Washington County, Westmoreland County, big chunks of Allegheny County, and parts of Armstrong and Indiana was all Westmoreland County. And Hannistown acted as the first county seat. Therefore, we hosted the first English courts west of the Allegheny Mountains. Nobody else can say that. That happened here in Westmoreland County. So that we continue, it wasn't too long till the Revolutionary War came about, and the Hannistown Resolves were adopted here at Westmoreland County, at Hannistown. About a month after the firings at Lexington and Concord, the news reached the frontier. We were the frontier at that point. And the residents of Westmoreland gathered at Hannistown to decide what the appropriate response to that attack should be, to that gunfire exchange. And there was arguing, I'm sure, as I try to picture what happened. There was debate. Some people wanted to remain loyal to Great Britain. Some people were fed up and angry and wanted to just cut ties and be done. And so they reached a compromise, which is sometimes a dirty word today. But they reached a compromise in which they agreed that they would fight to protect their rights. And they even formed a militia to do so. But they stopped short of declaring independence. They said, if Great Britain starts treating us right, and if they give us the same rights here that they give their citizens back in the old country, then we'll be loyal citizens once again. But until then, we'll take up arms and we will fight. And they formed a militia, 1st Battalion, Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. And that militia formed a flag, and that flag is now the official flag of Westmoreland County. It's a wonderful flag, one of the few surviving Revolutionary War flags. We know what others look like because people drew pictures of them, but the original actually exists and is housed at Fort Pitt. So I have an emblem of it on my lapel here. Wonderful flag, you'll see it flying over the courthouse, but it's a great tool for teaching students and adults, what the attitude was on the frontier. So we have a rattlesnake coiled to strike the British emblem. But we're warning them, we're mad and we're gonna strike. So we have a lot of Revolutionary War period history, starting with the Resolves, May 1775. But continuing on, militia recruited to serve with General Washington in the Continental Army, recruitment center for the Revolutionary War armies, a lot of them adding to the 8th Regiment. And at the end of the war, when everybody thought the war was over because Cornwallis had surrendered to Washington in the fall of 1781, the Native American tribes that allied with the British did not regard the war as being over. So they were still waging some skirmishes, and one of their skirmishes, the next to the last engagement during the Revolutionary War, was at Hannistown on July 13, 1782. The Seneca and some British and Canadian allies attacked Hannistown and burned it to the ground. So only 2 people died at Hannistown as a result of that attack, but the town never really recovered, so the county seat was moved to Greensburg. So Hannistown has a relatively short but very significant history in the starting of America.
All right, I'm gonna hand that down to Adam then. Thank you, and I think one of the things that is continually that you're hearing today, hopefully, is the power of place and what we have here in our backyard. And I couldn't help but think on the ride here, Henry spoke from Somerset County about the bookends, and I think that's very fitting. It's very appropriate. Not far from here, if you get in your vehicle, I don't know how many of you came via New Stanton, but a 6-minute struggle began in the skies right over top of the Pennsylvania Turnpike coming over top of New Stanton 23 years ago. And I think that as you're celebrating America's 250 and the memorial that we represent part of the largest terrorist attack on American soil, you think about the time, but before we get to lunch, 2,977 people were going to perish between the towers in New York City, at the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, and aboard Flight 93 here in southwestern Pennsylvania. I think there could be a lot of correlations that people could strike up, but I think it's the power of the citizenry that is the story that we tell. And if you think about whether or not you have the fortitude or the courage to do something, and you think about the fact that 40 people aboard Flight 93 on the morning of September 11th had 35 minutes to really figure out what was happening to people all across this country and put together a plan. And if they had had the time to debate about that, I don't know that we would have had the same results. But they put a plan into action, and in those 6 minutes, from New Stanton, that plane will crash in Somerset County, traveling at 563 miles per hour. What's astonishing is a lot of people have passed on 9/11. It's history now, isn't it? But I would say it's not, because more people have now died over the last 23 years as a result of the impacts of that day than actually on the day itself. And so I don't bring this to bring the room down, because I am very thankful to have Matt here moderating us here. It's a very heavy subject. It's a very important subject. The story is not over, and we continue to tell that story. And I think that that's appropriate to think about. You think about citizens rising up at the beginning of the revolution here that were fighting them back for what they believed was right and appropriate. And it's a very interesting parallel with the passengers and crew of Flight 93 being the fourth hijacked plane, and what could have happened in Washington, D.C. had they not acted that morning.
So just to stay with you, Adam, just because I kind of hear what you're talking about, how important is it to balance commemorating the past with looking towards the future and creating a vision to uphold for the years to come? The commemoration is very important, especially I think for those of, as I look around the room, those of you that lived the history that we present, that we interpret, and that we educate. And so for the lived generation that are coming to the site, it's very important for the families of the people that were lost. But it's also equally important now, and I think it's been alluded to several times here, that we have college students that were not alive on that day. And so the dynamic and the shift to education is more critical than ever. Flight 93 National Memorial, about 2 years ago, we saw a drastic decline in the amount of participation coming to the annual observance. And one of the big shifts that we've made over the last 2 years is in the realm of the power of the place and sharing that with people across the entire country, and really, frankly, beyond the borders of the United States. And so we've made an incredible push toward being relevant in classrooms, providing content and material that teachers, it's very accessible for them to be able to go on and pull resources and to begin teaching this material and sharing it. And so we've made a direct pivot from commemoration and balancing that with education at the forefront, because they're equally important. And I think that's forward thinking, because we want to have a new generation of stewards step up to the plate, because you've heard fantastic stories already from the panelists here about the importance of their places. But the most important thing is that we have people that fill in behind Matt and dress up like Washington for the next round of students that are learning about this. We'll get someone awake.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
And I think part of the story that your site and eyesight shares is everyday people. Until that day, nobody outside of their families or community heard of them. And that's similar to the story in Hannistown. It's regular people who did important things during important times. And I think that can be encouraging to our young people and all of us, that whether you become famous, as Colonel Washington did, or whether you're just being the best you can be where you are, that's important.
So, and because I've heard everyone in their statements already talking about young people, education, I want to shift over to a question about that. If Mary, if you want to take the mic for this one, at your site, and I think for everyone thinking about this, how do you engage young people and get them to be those active participants? How do you bring them into the fold to say, hey, for this, the mouthful, semi-quincentennial, I got it, I think, kind of. How do you bring them in? How do you get them to appreciate this?
I think, first of all, just getting them to understand the relevance of history, and that it's not boring, it's not the textbook version with just names and dates that they have to memorize and take a test, but telling stories of people ordinary people who never make it into the textbook, like James Byrd and others that did stand up and do what they needed to do, in difficult times. And so I think it's just connecting, helping them to see that the past is still relevant and there are lessons to be learned, whether it's through our leadership programming, school field trips, our living history, where we're bringing history to life and making it accessible and helping them to see the connections between the past and the present is one way that we're attempting to do that.
Would anyone like to add as what they're doing at their site for young people to pull them in? Go ahead, Brian, if you want to.
He gave it to me.
Oh,
I'll give it back.
never mind, Brian. There you go.
No, we are encouraging this year a very family focus with families. We do a lot of school trips as well and summer camp, but we have some family days planned, like our Frontier Family Days in June, that we hope to provide shared experiences for families and children. One of my favorite stories, if I can share it, being at Hannistown, it was the Frontier Court Days, and after the reenactment of court cases, there was a family walking by, and clearly one of the young boys, the son, had been on a field trip, and mom, she's walking by and she says, "That was interesting," and her son said, "I told you you'd like it, Mom." So, it makes an impact, they remember. So, family experiences in addition to school experiences.
So I would say be willing to get out of your comfort zone. It's very easy for the ranger staff to kind of stay in the visitor center. The folks come to the park, we give them the information, and I've started doing in the last few years, actually it's been 20 years, but I'm trying to get my staff to do it because I'm not going to be around forever. I soon have to retire. It's just a fact of life. But sometimes, Muhammad doesn't come to the mountain has to go to Muhammad. And I did a school program. I don't dress up like George. I'm not as good looking as this guy. But it's amazing when you go to that school and you engage the youth there. And how many of them I expect probably in the next week or so, some of those kids might come and visit. And that's what's important. Don't be afraid to try new stuff. I applaud Adam and his staff for the outreach they do on the 9/11 event. Yeah, it's very easy. They can sit there and kind of do a nice commemorative program on the anniversary. But they have, the tentacles of their story has reached worldwide. And again, that's the thing I would say is don't be afraid to try something new. And again, if it doesn't work, you know what? You try it. Tweak it, try something new. And again, for necessity, outreach with off-site programs with school kids and living history has done very well.
Yeah, I think if there's a way for you to share the events that make your site special and build it around an opportunity for whether it's educators, whether it's students, whether it's other civic groups like Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, I think it's almost a lost opportunity if you if you have the capacity as an organization to be able to do that and you don't, it's a missed opportunity because that's how you're going to maintain your relevancy moving forward, I think. Specifically, I am thinking of, we're very fortunate in the sense that we have a nonprofit group, the Friends of Flight 93 National Memorial has been very generous with their educational outreach and providing scholarships as well to help fund students from Westmoreland County, Somerset County, all around Laurel Highlands to have the opportunity to come to our site, and they continue to provide that, but they have also been an ally, and so building partnerships around education is also where you can make those inroads. Hopefully you can find those opportunities to do that. It's critical.
So with this, with what we have coming up, this huge anniversary, we're talking about the planning process, which a lot of sites have already done. They've already started planning events, planning programming. would anyone like to share any programs that you have coming up or events that you can, and how you have geared that towards either the public or young people that you're going to be doing for the anniversary?
Okay, Dawn alluded to this earlier with the 250th anniversary of the adoption of the Hannistown Resolves. We will have an event there for the public and the community. We hope to debut a film about it, a short film, but something, you know, that will last beyond just the day. I'll also point out that very close to that time, Derry Township is celebrating their 250th anniversary of their formation, and they will be conducting a commemoration / celebration at historic Hannistown. So that's in the immediate future. In June, we have our Frontier Family Days, to see what it was like to live, you know, in the 18th century, see the choices that the people had to make, the men had to make to leave their families, you know, on the frontier alone. So, you know, we'll see what life was like at that point before the war, because as this group knows, you know, independence didn't start on July 4th, 1776. There was a lot that led up to it.
And I'll add to that, we're planning to add an exhibit in 2025, hopefully, about the friendly fire incident that Matt told, the story of his George when 2 Virginia regiments mistook each other. That's one of our big goals. Programming wise, I mean, everything we're doing right now is through the lens of Road to the Revolution, and just sort of gently beating people over the head with this notion that in order to understand you know, the American Revolution, you have to look back into the French-Indian War and understand what was happening during that time period to understand why these British subjects were willing to rebel against the king. So, you know, our daily programming, our daily talks, our gallery talks, living history will also highlight what it was like to live in the 18th century and to kind of experience what that was like a little bit more.
Go ahead, Brian.
You got the mic.
Well, I think thematically it makes more sense for you to go.
So for Fort Necessity, more so Friendship Hill, next June 1st, as part of the bicentennial of Lafayette's visit to the United States, we will be hosting an event down at the Friendship Hill House. We have a wonderful gentleman named Ron Duquette who gets into character as Gallatin. I don't know which Lafayette we're going to have. There's 2 or 3 of them that are kind of floating around, and the 200 group, you know, they're still kind of solidifying their schedule. But we've been promised that Lafayette would visit Friendship Hill on the afternoon of June 1st. We also score a major coup in the back that one of the benefits of being in the Park Service and what I get to do in historic weapons, I do a lot of traveling around for inspections and so forth. And in Philadelphia, I happen to be in the curatorial vault. They're trying to show me all the guns, and they're like, yeah, that's nice. And then they said, oh, we have this object here. It's kind of cute. And I looked at it, and I said, oh, it's a walking stick. And then they showed me a portrait. It's the one that Lafayette had. And I said, what are you all going to do with it? Well, we're thinking about putting it on display, but we're not sure. So I went back to my curator and said, I want it. So, and we just got word about a week ago that yes, it will be coming to Friendship Hill. It'll be returning to Friendship Hill and be on display during the summer of 2025. So that's the big event for us for next year. I'm looking kind of ahead. One thing that always bothered me about the bicentennial, it was a big celebration in 1976 and then went, what are we going to do after 2026? So we do have, I'm looking ahead at 2029 when we have our 275th anniversary of Fort Necessity. I also know that Continental Artillery actually camped at the Great Meadows. Proctor's artillery was being shifted to Fort Pitt. So I'd like to have an event sometime in that. So I'm kind of thinking beyond 26. I'm also looking to partner with a lot of the smaller groups. Thanks to Dawn, we've actually connected with Ohio State Park. I recently just talked with a young gentleman who works with the Army Corps of Engineers at Yacht Lake, who says, yeah, I'd like to do something, and kind of use the Youghiogheny River as kind of a corridor to talk about our history in this region and connecting with sites like the town of Confluence and Connellsville. So I'm here to help them do their events. Again, as much as I'd like for folks to come to my park, and they still want to come to my park, sometimes it's better to be active in those smaller events, and that's where I see my role in this upcoming 250th.
That's a hard act to follow, Brian. All I will add is, and I had heard this through the grapevine, somebody had recently gone to a Go Laurel Highlands event and asked a question about our annual observances. And I don't know that it's widely known because during 2020 and 2021, those observances, due to the pandemic, we had to cap the event, and we had a very large outpouring of families who were returning to the area in the Laurel Highlands to be here for that observance. And we were only open for part of the day in 2021, which we exceeded over 10,000 people in about 4 or 5 hours or so. That's all to say that that annual observance is for the public, and if you haven't been to one, I'd like to invite you to join us. It'll be Thursday in 2025 and Friday on 2026, and we will be continuing our Teach to Remember programming, which is we have active live streaming program through a Zoom platform. It's a Zoom event platform to provide programming. It's more than just the day of September 11th, but it is during the month of September. I'd also like to maybe piggyback a little bit off of Superintendent Clark, who spoke earlier about the fact that our facilities are really open. There are so many civic groups. I see civic activity, which is the lasting impact of the revolution. I'd like to think of all of the groups that come and express their appreciation and observe what occurred on September 11th at the site. And so if there are opportunities like that, like you want to bring a Boy Scout group or a Girl Scout group to do a wreath laying or a ceremony or something like that, please give us a call and let us know. But like Brian, I think we're here to be here for the community, be relevant with all of you and the plans that are going to make the 250th special.
So I think as you're talking about all these different events, awesome programming that you guys are putting together, what's been one of the biggest maybe roadblocks or problems you've experienced in this planning for this anniversary? Has there been a struggle? Has there been something you've had to overcome during that maybe some other sites are also feeling while this is going on?
Well, money's always a roadblock. As an independent nonprofit organization, that's an ongoing issue. And I will say from the point of view of Hannistown that a lot of attention is given to the activities on the east, and they deserve a lot of attention, Boston, Philadelphia, Williamsburg, but little attention is given to the western campaign of the Revolutionary War. And that was played out here in the frontier of Westmoreland County and other counties up and down that Allegheny Ridge. So overcoming the idea that everything happened on the East Coast is sometimes a problem.
For me, it's frustration in the fact that I do not have much guidance from above. So I'm going to vent here, Steve. It's not you. It's not you. Because Steve knows where this is going to go. Because a few years ago, we had gotten, we'll say, our marching orders that there was going to be a big 250th, and I was asked to attend some of these meetings, and it was utter chaos. I'll just give you an example. Someone used the phraseology, we need to make sure everyone comes to the table. And in the chat, someone says, we shouldn't use that because some people may not have a table. And I'm like, what? So they got caught in the weeds, and there was not a whole lot of direction coming down. So what I'm saying is that we need to do this at our level. I'm not going to wait for voice on high to say this is how we're going to do it in the National Park Service, because they didn't do a great job 50 years ago. And the only way it's going to get done is at the great grassroots level, which is how it was done in the Revolution. people got together, said, we're gonna get it done. So this is the best example of how it's gonna get done, with various interests, various groups, various organizations saying, we're gonna do this. So that, I like seeing this because it definitely is the direction we need to go in, because if we wait for leadership to tell us what to do, how to do it, or for the money and all those other things we want, before you know it, it'll be 2027 and we'll be going, we didn't do anything. So this is a good place to be, and again, that's all I'll say.
How many of you like history? Raise your hand. Oh, good, we're in a good crowd. But that's not always the case, and I think one of our challenges, and it's kind of just been an ongoing challenge, it's not just related to the 250th, is just getting people and kids to understand that history is interesting. We hear all the time, history's boring. No, it's not. You just have to tell the story the right way. So I think for us, it's the challenge of constantly trying to get people to understand that history is interesting and it is relevant to our lives today, and just continuing to help them understand that.
So I know, because I want to give a little time at the end here to have a few like wrap-up questions from the audience if anyone wants the opportunity. But the last question I want to jump to is actually if you can share a piece of advice, which I kind of feel like we're talking about a little bit, like, hey, how are we going to overcome some of these challenges? If you can share a piece of advice for pulling off this commemoration, what would be one thing you could tell the group here? Doesn't have to be just one, maybe. You can pull it out a little bit.
Find your focus and then stay focused. It's really, I know even within our site sometimes we're like, oh, a squirrel, let's do that, let's do this. But just find your focus and kind of stick with it. Plan ahead, which we're still trying to do, but stick with your focus.
I'll say be sustainable in whatever you do. Don't overextend yourself. I think it's easy to get wrapped up in the moment and you want to do a lot of things, and I think I'm echoing some of the advice here, but just stay within your wheelhouse and focus on what you can do and do really well, and partner with those that can maybe amplify that work with a similar mission and partnership.
Yeah, and along those lines, a lot of us are small organizations, and it's good to stick with your focus, but try to just put that 250 spin on whatever you're already doing. You don't have to recreate the wheel, you just have to put a little twist on it so that it's relevant to 250. And I will also preach to the choir, you're here, you're looking for partners. Dawn's a great source for that, as Go Laurel Highlands is as well, so look for those partners who can share.
And have fun, it's a birthday party.
All right, so I do want to leave a little, we have about like 5-10 minutes. Are there any questions out, anyone? Okay, yeah. Oh, for me, okay, good.
What were you thinking when you built that Fort Lee out of sticks? That was crazy. What were you thinking about making big meadows surrounded by forests?
Do you want me to put my hair back on? Well, I don't think any of us can ever get in the true headspace of the guy, but we also have someone who I think on the stage here could probably give you after he's, I think something at these historic sites that what we start to learn is that when we're there, we do start to kind of live it. So I have, sure, I'm in Fort Ligonier, so I can give you maybe an idea there, but the person who is going to be able to kind of live through that is going to be Brian. Do you want to say anything about that, Brian, real quick, or?
What was he thinking?
Well, again, his goal was to retreat to Wills Creek. He was never intending to fight at the Great Meadows. He had built a supply station there a month earlier. By the time his retreating army arrives at the Great Meadows, his men had been without salt for 10 days. The extra supplies and reinforcements had not been there. 1/4 of his men collapsed from exhaustion. He very easily could have abandoned them. He decides to keep his army together. And as far as command and control, we see the wooden stockade, but the entrenchments, which are those low mounds, were actually chest-high log walls. So he builds a square enclosure called a redoubt. And the French commander said, the fort was well situated. I dare not make a frontal assault. So even though he's in a target-rich environment, by the end of the day, the French are in trouble. The French are out of food, and they're out of ammunition, and their native allies are threatening to abandon them in the morning. And it's the French who offer to Washington, are you willing to give up before we give up? They don't say on that last part, but they're able to convince Washington to surrender. So it's not a bad a location. Imagine his army strung along that retreat road, how easily they would have been picked off. They would have been totally destroyed. So that's the quick and dirty.
That's what I was thinking. That's exactly it. But thank you, Brian, for saying that, just because I think, again, kind of to go on what your question is, like being at those historic sites and then being able to get in the minds of those people, but also, as I've heard echoed in this panel, the regular people. Not just Washington, but maybe one of those Virginians who's with him at Fort Necessity. And I think the panel would agree that if you are able to hit home on the regular person story, the bigger people kind of are, it's over the top when you learn about them. But if you can hit home on like making things relatable, especially for this anniversary, that it's going to make a bigger impact on the people that are coming through our doors. So, yeah. Hi.
So are there any plans and efforts to be working with members of federally recognized tribes to bring in the Native American perspective, like the Cherokee or allied with the British in Fort Ligonier, or perhaps the perspective of why the Seneca burned down Youngstown? You know, we with like some of the relationships with, for example, that Fort Pitt has been really emerging over the past 10 to 15 years, I think. Are there any efforts to be doing that during his Federation era?
I mean, for us, that's just, we're starting that process, so I think it's just a continuation of that process. You know, we're a British fort, but that doesn't mean we just tell the British story. It means that we tell the French side, we tell the Native American side, we talk about the women and, you know, camp followers, the tradespeople who are part of that. So we are making an effort to pursue those relationships. And just like Fort Pitt has taken them over a decade to build those relationships, we're early in that, but that's one of our goals, not just for 2026, but beyond.
And I'll echo that as well. We're very interested in telling the Native American perspective. We do currently, as we're doing guided tours, talk to people about why they attacked Hannistown, what was their motivation, what was our role in that. We would very much like to reach out to do that, because there was a sort of a love-hate relationship. Sometimes we got along great with the natives, and other times we didn't. So telling that whole story is important. A good point to bring up. Thank you.
I'll just follow up that there is an Indigenous America 250 effort, and I think some of the challenges on the national and federal level that I see with government relations is because they are, you know, there's some very serious conversations about celebrating American independence, but Native Americans were losing theirs, you know, protesting and fighting the same independence. So I know the museum is looking at, you know, how do we commemorate this year, but how do we question it in 2026, which is a lot different than 1976. So being careful about how some of these stories.
But if you have any resources about that, I would love to, having passed that along to me, I'd pass it on to the group. And I will just add, Bushy Run, Matt Adams wanted to be here today, and his museum person got sick, and so he's there covering the Bushy Run. But I know they have been working very hard to forge a relationship with some of the federally recognized tribes. The difficulty is we don't have any that are here presently, so we have to reach out. We have to reach out to them in New York. So that is a distance and location challenge. But Bushy Run has forged that relationship. So if anybody has questions about that, Matt Adams would be a good person to.
We also have with the Seneca Mission, so you know, I'd be happy to share our experience and resources as well.
Yeah, so I think that's something we should all share resources on, because I think we all want to do it, and it's just how to do it.
In the back, there's two there, so one, or, yeah, you guys, in the green first, and then, yeah, sorry.
I just wanted to follow up because my question was related to that. The American Association of State and Local History and the AUJ have both put out statements about using this opportunity and about the revolution as an unfinished resolution. And my question was related to how are we working to bring in underrepresented perspectives into attracting visitors to come out to the site. And I just want to thank you in advance for the work that you've already done.
Oh, Brian couldn't quite hear. So, could you be a little bit louder just to,
Okay, would you like to?
microphone might be easier, yeah.
Sorry about that. I just asked how we were incorporating underrepresented voices. I was kind of backing up what they were saying, since I know the American Historical Association and the American Association of State and Local History have really urged us to think about it as an unfinished revolution, and I didn't want to get that lost today. And I said thank you as well for what you've already done.
Well, as a federal site, I do have 5 affiliated nations that we consultate with anytime we do anything, any kind of archaeology, any kind of exhibitry, so forth. So we do have those contacts. And again, the big thing is communication. You know, be the person who reaches out to say, hey, we're interested in working with you. Do you have someone on your staff who can maybe help us with an exhibit, or we're thinking or having this event, and could you maybe be interested in coming to us? That initiate that conversation with these folks and communities and so forth. Don't wait for them to come to you, and then you'll end up with the backup. Well, why do you include this group or that group or so forth? So again, as I mentioned earlier, that's why I'm offering help with these local communities who might have a unique story to tell, or people in history that they would like to bring to the forefront. And that's where we see, the big thing is communicating, is don't be afraid to reach out. Send a letter to them or call them, so forth, and that's how you get started.
Well, and I think to Brian's point, it is always relationship building. It's not something that happens overnight, so you want to build relationships and things like that over time, so.
It certainly makes it easier. If you wait to the last minute, then they're like, it's better if you get it started. I know it was it last year at the Braddock Road?
The BRPA, yeah.
Yeah, and they talk about how the wonderful relationship they have now, with the Braddock Museum? Or Fort Pitt?
It was Fort Pitt, Alan
Fort
Gutchess,
Pitt.
yeah.
But again, it's taken time. It just doesn't happen overnight. And then that trust, the only way you have a good relationship is with trust. And once that trust is gone, they're like, if you ask for something and then you don't hear back from someone for 2 or 3 years, you're like, and then they reach out to you again. It's like, so again, it's keeping those lines of communication open.
I think there's one other question up here too.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about Bushy Run. And I was just, even the timeline of Bushy Run to Fort Necessity was kind of my question. But also I was thinking the National Road, and if that played a factor. I know the Lincoln Highway has a group in a museum, so I didn't know if the National Road had something similar. And also about Hannistown, I knew the story of it burning down. I wasn't sure how big Hannistown was at the time, and Greensburg was at the time, like maybe why that switch happened. So those are my questions.
So I'll speak on the National Road. Again, the National Road Heritage Corridor, and that came about in the 1990s. It's kind of slowly been going downhill. And it's a shame, because the common thread are things like rivers and roads and trails that everyone's using. And one of my memories from the bicentennial is the wagon train. And the Freedom Train, I'll mention trains, Steve, I know you like trains, I like trains too. So, but those kind of things. And the National Road Festival used to have a big event, they still do in May, but they used to have a wagon train come through on the National Road. And it connected all these communities and opportunities to tell stories. And that might be a chance to have a renaissance, again, of folks getting involved. But again, the V word, volunteers, that I've seen, again, my volunteer participation at my sites has dropped off. As older folks, unfortunately, we sometimes leave the earth, that's what happens. And it's hard to get young folks involved. And that's, I think this is a great opportunity for the 250th, is to engage the youth, to let them know that they are the future leaders and custodians of history. So that's the challenge, that's another big challenge.
Thank you for the question about Hannistown. At its peak, Hannistown is described as having 30 buildings. It doesn't sound very big, but for those standards, it was a respectable sized community, rivaling the size of Pittsburgh if you take away any military presence. And the second part was, Greensburg. Okay, after the town was burned in 1782, it never recovered. Court continued to be held there for a few more years, but it was miserable. At that point, it was described as being a miserable place. So there was a push to move the county seat to Newtown, which was later named Greensburg in honor of Nathaniel Greene. But there was the Pennsylvania Road. The new Pennsylvania Road had come through what, now Lincoln Highway, roughly. So it was always good to have a way to get to town. So Hannistown was founded along the Forbes Road, and Greensburg was founded along the Pennsylvania Road. So it was an accessible place, and the county seat was moved. Did we have a question or a comment? Yes?
Bree was just saying, look. Okay, do you want the mic?
And this will probably be our last one, and then we'll break.
I'll try and keep it upbeat. So to answer your question about the National Road and the National Road Heritage Corridor, hi, I'm Bree from the National Road Heritage Corridor. Our executive director couldn't be here today as she's in another meeting, but I did just want to say that the National Road Heritage Corridor is going through a renaissance or a resurgence, and we are super excited to be an impactful community partner and a cultural partner for America's 250, and also for all of the Lafayette events. So I can pass out Sarah Collier's information or all of our information for National Road, but we are excited and excited to partner with all the amazing organizations, but we do have a presence. Thank you.
And Bree is a good person to ask about Fayette County events, as well as the Lafayette 200 that's happening in the southern part of Westmoreland County and Fayette County. So I just have a couple. Are you done?
Oh, I'm good.
George? Yeah, I have a couple of announcements.
I'm here, I'm hanging out.
I have a couple of announcements. Thank you very much to the panel.
We'll give them a round of applause.
I think we can all agree that it was a really good dialogue to have, and a really honest and transparent dialogue. So there's a couple people that I want to point out that are here that some of you may not know because they're not typically at our events. Natalie and Mike are here from Westmoreland Cleanways. They are our recycling gurus. So if that is a program that you would like to institute at your institution for an event, they have temporary things that you can put in for temporary 1-day, 2-day events. But they also can help you if you want to create a more substantial program of recycling at your location. And we're kicking around some ideas about doing something for the 250 in regards to recycling. So I just wanted to point them out, find them at lunch if you want to talk to them. We had mentioned, Con had mentioned about the municipalities. This is my Westmoreland County map. I want it to be all yellow. I want all the municipalities to pass America's 250 resolutions. We have 21 of them that have passed them so far. So this is not a yellow map. So come and look. If you're from a town, come and see if your town's on this map. If it's not, hound your borough and township councils to pass their resolutions. Yes.
We have over 350 municipal partners now. I think I left that out of the presentation, so you'd be in good company.
And we have 21 in Westmoreland County, and we should have 60. So 60, yeah. So, and then the other people that I want to introduce are in the back of the room. We have Maria and Vivi, and they are from Pittsburgh Latino Magazine.